Hey y'all, so before I get started on this particular entry, there's a couple of things I want to get out of the way quickly. One, this entry is going to seem angrier than others, so I want to make it explicitly clear it is not aimed at any persons and or parties. Secondly, this entry may come across as passive-aggressive, dramatic, or even in some cases self-martyring, and I want to make it explicit and abundant to y'all that this is not aimed to be the case. Like all interlude videos and the progenitors, the Let's Talk About videos that I once did, this is mainly expository stream of consciousness to establish what I'm thinking and feeling and to let y'all get to know me better as a person. It is also meant, in some circumstances, to establish a baseline. So if you or anybody you know may be going through similar situations and or possibly encountering these pitfalls, I strongly encourage y'all to have a conversation because in this particular case, while it's extremely common, it also can be one of the most toxic. That being said, on to the video. No matter what relationship we get into, business or personal, it can easily be defined by three different categories. The first one, the most healthy of them in my opinion, is the bilateral give and take. We give when it's expected or when it's asked of us, and in turn, we, at some point or the next, will receive back. That is a perfectly well-defined logical scion that we can be using to be good people among our friends, loved ones, and coworkers alike. However, just because that is the best one and the most healthy out of everything, it usually is the least one touched upon. And that gives rise to the other two categories, nothing but give, and in turn, nothing but take. Now, whether we want to admit it or not, we usually tend to fall into these latter two categories for one reason or the next, consciously or unconsciously. But, as I said before, that is usually the least healthy. Now, why am I talking about this? Because over the recent months, I have felt pretty well stressed and or just going through rough times, as I've talked about often on social media. However, it's difficult for me because I was brought up at a very young age that it's not right to talk about oneself unless actually asked. Because people have their own things they've got to deal with, they have their own issues, they have their own tasks. So for me to speak up, it's usually not exactly held in high regard. And as time progressed, it wasn't just about not talking about myself because it was considered rude of me, but rather because it was expected of me to be this person who gives freely and helps others because I'm a good listener, because I am a caring individual, because I wear my heart on my sleeve. And that is as unhealthy as just constantly taking. And what started as me just thinking, okay, you know, I'm gonna give because I choose to, it became an overbearing expectation of me to give. Even going back as far as high school, it was expected of me to listen, to be this little crutch for individuals because they didn't want to or didn't feel like they had to divulge in other individuals. And it started for me as because I did not want them to feel alone as I have. And as time progressed, the cycle continued. I didn't want people to feel as I did. I did not want individuals to feel alone, upset, feeling like that there was nobody to depend on. But eventually, as I've said before, that turned into an expectation. Now, I'm not saying that you should ignore people you care about. That's just the complete opposite. Hang on. It's 137. That's 265. Yeah, let's go with the whip. There we go. Anyways, let me continue. because I don't want to come across as an individual that is doing it because he has to. I want to come across as a person that genuinely cares about his friends, that cares about his loved ones and the people he wants to be happy. And I don't want people to ever feel as alone as I have. However, when you are going through something as I have, you still have to have that acceptance, that desire, and it becomes difficult after a while because I am going through things, dealing with my anxiety, dealing with my depression, dealing with stress with work and on a personal front, and there are times that I want to talk about what I'm feeling, talk about what I'm going through. As always, let's pause for an interlude while we do the upgrades. Anyway, so I never want people to feel as I have. I don't want people to feel confused, lost, alone. And somebody, a friend of mine, actually once said, I'm probably one of the biggest enablers he has ever seen. Now, this was probably meant from the professional side, mainly with the project and my promotions of other people, but in some cases, it struck a chord with me because maybe I am this enabler. Maybe I am taking too much time to, care for others. In a lot of cases, I feel like they're not actually caring back. Now, I mean, once again, I don't think that they consciously or unconsciously are doing this, that they are taking advantage of me being this individual that honestly cares and wants to see people grow, flourish, and feel better about themselves. But at the same time, part of me feels that these people that I deal with on a regular basis, mind you, are so wrapped up in their own ways and so wrapped up on one thing or the next that they don't actually see that I'm hurting. And once again, it could be just easy for me to jump in and say, hey, I'm going through some stuff. I could really use the help. I could really use the feedback. But recently, and by recent I mean probably within the past 3 to 6 months, it's felt less like an unconscious not wanting to open my mouth because people are going through their own stuff, and more that people don't care. That people are more concerned about their own self-interest and their own issues, that they will immediately flip the tables back on themselves. And in a lot of cases, that is the most painful. Now, there's an individual that I talk to on a regular basis who will remain nameless just because it's our conversation, it's our own personal relationship. And this individual I have kind of almost likened what I do as to that of a sin eater. Now, for those who are unfamiliar with the concept of the sin eater, a sin eater is an individual that lives outside the expectations of whatever that religious order they handle. And in return for one thing or the next, they can literally devour the sins of a person so their soul feels clean, that their soul feels ready to enter the next life, as opposed to living with that on their conscience and possibly dying and going to the lesser part of the afterlives. And this individual, they're not saying it to be crude or malicious, but they're doing it to raise awareness for my actions, and that it is not healthy to live such a life, to live such a concept, and be this person who gives freely and doesn't expect anything back. But at the same time, it's extremely hard for me because, as I've said earlier, I don't want to open my mouth. Now, as I've said several times, yes, I could just say, hey, I'm going through some stuff, I could really use the help. And a lot of times it's gone from, you know, from saying, hey, okay, I'll listen to you, or offering insight, which 9 times out of 10, I don't want to hear advice. I don't want to hear, here's what I would do if I were in your shoes. What I would like is to just have an open ear, to have somebody that's willing to listen and just be there for me. And a lot of other times, it is just like, they're like, hey, you know, well, if I was in your shoes, I would do A, B, C, and D. And once again, when I'm going through something, I don't want to have advice. I'm trying to get something off my chest, because once the air is clear, as I think is the case for a lot of us, we can think clearly, and then we can actually expand upon what we have been told, what we are actually feeling, as opposed to just reacting. And like I said recently, whether I'm making sense or not, it feels like the role of a sin eater is just kind of taking the forefront. And I don't want to feel like that's the only reason that I'm around, is that people rely on me for one thing or the next. I don't want to be the sin eater. I don't want to keep living as this person, because eventually it's gonna take over. It's going to, you know, be unhealthy, and the relationships that I get into, I don't want to feel like it's just for one thing or the next. I want to feel like it's a bilateral give and take, because that is, as I've said before, the most healthy of relationships. But at the same time, I am compelled to be this, what the hell? Be this force, to be the person who is relied upon. And it's gone from just because, you know, no one else is stepping up, and I don't want people to feel this way, to now it's, okay, well, Knight can do all this. Knight can solve these problems because I can rely on him. And while that's good in the short run, it's terrible in the long run. Interesting. So, with that being said, what is the workaround? How does one get out of that cycle of doing nothing but giving or nothing but taking? And honestly, whether this is just me getting in my own way or not, I don't know. It could be me getting in my own way. It could be me, you know, as I've said in the disclaimer, martyring myself for the good of somebody else. I can't be the answer for that. But what I do know is that I'm not the only one in this situation. I am not the only person that is giving the shirt off my back. I am not the only individual that, well, hang on one second. Yeah, well, looky-loo, we're actually going to the ramparts instead of me ending the entry now and here. Anyway, I hate the ramparts. Least favorite part of the first part of this game. Anyway, there are people out there that are giving freely, and there are those that are taking freely. And those that give freely are hurting on the inside, but they don't know how to put the brakes on. They don't understand that, or maybe they do understand, but they're still compelled to help. And that's the problem with sin eaters. That's the problem with people who will constantly give and not get anything back, or not ask for anything back. But regardless, it is unhealthy as hell. And I don't know of a genuine way to get outside of this, because while yes, part of it is self-induced, part of it is self-caused, once you get into that cycle, it's very tough to break. And in some cases, I don't know how to tell somebody, like, enough is enough is enough, that I need to heal, I need what I am giving, I need to receive something for one reason or the next. And for those that are dealing with it, the only thing that I can say, or that I could possibly offer, is take a step back. Have that conversation with somebody that you think is in one of these latter two categories, in a non-bilateral situation. And even if that person is yourself, and you have to take a hard look in the mirror and say, what's going on? How can this be better? And the other thing I want to convey too is that if you think that there is somebody going through a situation, how can you genuinely give to this person? And honestly, there's a very, very simple solution for that case, and that is to genuinely ask, okay, that's new damage for me, but okay, I'll take it. Free souls and cells for me. And that is to genuinely ask a 4-letter or 4-word sentence. How are you doing? It's simple, but you would be so surprised at the outcome that comes from it. But it's not just asking how are you doing. Don't let it be perfunctory or in some cases maybe even obligatory. Be genuine with your question. And if you don't feel like you can currently get involved in that, then say something simple. Say that you want to be there, and while you can't give right at the moment, say that if the circumstances are better, you can be there. Once again, you will be amazingly surprised at the outcome for something as simple as genuinely checking in with somebody, because positivity, as I've said before, always is better than negativity. Okay, that's the way to go. And you'd be surprised about the level of relationships, both, once again, business and personal, that get better from taking a genuine interest in somebody's affairs. And I don't want to come across as being pissed off and genuinely angry, even though this entry is going to come across as such. Because I am hurting. I am in pain. And I don't know how to tell somebody, I need you right now. I genuinely don't. And the only way I can feel open to do that is when somebody will ask, how are you doing? But at the same time, once again, don't make it perfunctory. Don't make it obligatory. And don't, for the love of God, actually flip it into saying that, yeah, let's ignore that. And don't flip it back to you. I'm not saying that you should abandon your own desires and your own need to feel better. And once again, I don't want to I don't want to come across as saying that, you don't have the right to self-care, because you do. Self-care is essential for learning, growing, and healing. But there is a line between self-healing and selfishness. And we all fall into that trap. And that be purty. Not good enough. But there has to be a balance between giving and taking. And while I don't know how to take, at some point or the next, something's going to happen. At some point or the next, something's going to crack. At some point, rock bottom will hit. And I'm not saying that's going to happen with me, but it will happen with somebody you know in a business or a personal capacity. And when the bottom falls out, it's going to hit for everybody. So all I am asking for those that may be, once again, you or somebody you know, it doesn't have to be elaborate. It does not have to be this big example of, I am a good person, I am a friend, because that could be misconstrued as being not genuine, as for being just like, hey, okay, I'm going to show this off, and in turn, things are going to be peachy keen. I don't have to worry about it again. And for somebody that is going through something like what I'm dealing with, i.e. anxiety and depression, things like that will come across as perfunctory. Things like that will come across as disingenuine. And that is the last thing anybody who is hurting needs to go through. So, in conclusion to this long rant, all I ask is that you take time to reflect. You take time to see what is happening in your life and others' lives around you, those that are directly impacted by your actions. Take a little bit of time and reflect. That's all I ask. Because if we can, as a group, as a collective, work on ourselves and work on being better for ourselves and in turn others, things will get easier. I'm not saying they'll get easier overnight, but something I've had to learn pretty quickly is that people are selfish and people want what's best for them. So in turn, we have to be better individuals across the board for ourselves and for that of everybody else around us. So in conclusion, all I ask is that you take time and don't react and think for 1 second, how is this going to impact me and how is this going to impact others?